Oh, Canada, my home and native land. All great changes are preceded by chaos. Deepak Chopra. 2014, September. I could no longer ignore my son's cries for normalcy. He desperately wanted to go back to school and have friends. It was time for us to leave China. I debated where we could go to start over. I wanted to go to New Zealand, but I worried that I would not get permission to stay. So I fell back on the path of least resistance and booked us tickets to Vancouver. I thought that, since we were Canadian citizens, the kids could easily settle into a school and we could begin a new life there. Packing up 2 years of our life in China into boxes was both a ritual and a time of reflection. Once again, I found myself at another intersection where I had to decide what to put in our suitcases and what to leave behind. When the suitcases were packed and I had emptied the room, I took one last look. All that was left were traces of the memories we had shared. Finally, it was time to leave. When the taxi came to pick us up to take us to the train station, the driver argued that my bags weren't going to fit in the car. "Of course they will fit," I exclaimed, nervous that he would refuse to take us. "We can put the swords in the middle of the seats and the kids can put their feet on the small bags." He shook his head, but I kept insisting. "Watch, I'll show you how it is done. I have experience with fitting it all in," I said proudly. He sighed and allowed us to squeeze into the car for the 4.5-hour drive to Wuhan. We waved goodbye to Shifu and his family, marking the end of our time in China. We arrived at Vancouver International Airport, and I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach as we stood in line at immigration. The crowd buzzed with the murmur of various languages, and the fluorescent lights seemed to make the airport feel even more sterile and intimidating. I glanced at my watch, trying to distract myself from the nervous tension building inside me. Finally, the immigration officer signaled for us to move forward. Is this going to be a warm welcome home? I wondered. She took my passport, her expression inscrutable, until she looked up at me. "Do you have their father's permission to enter Canada?" Her tone was professional but probing, and my heart skipped a beat. "What?" I blurted out, panic rising in my voice. Since when do I need permission from their father to enter their country of citizenship? Frantically, I rifled through my bag until I found the papers Pierre had signed, granting me permission to take the children to China. I focused on my breathing, trying to keep my pulse steady. This wasn't the first time I had been stopped at immigration. Living my life differently always seemed to elicit questions. After some deliberation, she let us through, and I let out a big breath of relief. "Oh my God, that was close," I told the kids, who seemed indifferent to our almost disastrous arrival into Canada. Relieved, we stepped outside and grabbed a taxi to make our way to South Surrey, where my childhood friend lived. I hoped she could help us find a place to live, but only a few days after our arrival, she unexpectedly told me we had to either leave or pay rent. "Hey, give me a chance. I just bought a car and I plan to visit more homes," I reminded her. I thought it would be easy to find an apartment to rent, but it didn't have any local references and the homeowners were suspicious of my foreign references. I didn't want to live in the suburbs, so I moved us closer to Vancouver into a motel with a kitchen. The room was a cramped, dimly lit space with peeling wallpaper and a musty smell that never quite went away. The single window provided a view of the parking lot where I could see dubious characters lingering outside. The furnishings were old and worn, with a sagging bed, a lumpy pull-out couch, and a small table with mismatched chairs. The carpet was stained and threadbare, making me hesitant to walk barefoot. The room's overall dinginess offered little comfort. The tiny bathroom had cracked tiles and rust-stained fixtures, and the water pressure was barely adequate. Every night I lay awake listening to the sounds of shouting, door slamming, and sirens in the distance, and I felt more anxious with each passing hour. The thin walls did little to muffle the noise, and I constantly worried about our safety in such an environment. Living in this seedy motel was a far cry from the stability and security I had hoped to provide for my kids. The atmosphere was oppressive, and I felt a constant sense of unease, always on edge and unable to relax. It was a stark contrast to the fresh start I had envisioned for us in Canada. Canadian law stated that until I got a formal lease agreement and utility bills in my name, the kids couldn't attend school. This meant that they had to stay home with me. Emily never complained about moving from place to place. She found comfort in her games, hoping her brother would join her. Olivier, on the other hand, rarely felt comfortable in our new surroundings. Often he agreed to play but then changed his mind and disappointed Emily. "Olivier, you said you would play Sims with me," Emily whined. Sims was a series of simulation video games that they could play together, and Emily loved to build families. "Yeah, but I don't feel like it anymore," Olivier replied, burying his nose back in his book. "But you promised. You always do this," Emily cried. "Emily, just play by yourself, please," I pleaded with exhaustion. "But Mama, he promised," Emily's voice cracked. I tried reasoning with her. "He asked if you'd spar with him, and you said yes, but only if he plays Sims with you." Emily defended herself. "But I want him to play my games too, not just his." "Let it go, Emily," I told her, feeling helpless. Then I turned to my son. "Olivier, why do you keep making promises you can't keep?" I snapped, my patience fraying at the edges as I observed his distracted demeanor. He glanced up briefly, his expression a mix of guilt and indifference. "I don't mean to. Never mind," he muttered, retreating further into his book. I knew that I was only exacerbating the situation, unable to detach myself from their battles and help them find a solution. Just then, two men stopped outside the door and started yelling at each other about a drug deal, and I felt an overwhelming rush of sensations come up from my belly and out of my eyes. I thought that Canada was a nice place to live. What am I going to do? I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. My kids came to sit on either side of me and put their hands on my shoulders, not quite knowing how to console me. Lost in my own turmoil, I barely registered the ping of the email notification on my phone. When I finally looked, my heart started pounding at the sight of the message. It was from the school in my friend's neighborhood in the suburbs. "Okay, guys, listen up," I announced, trying to inject some enthusiasm into my voice, despite my most recent meltdown. "We're heading back to White Rock. It looks like you're registered at the Earl Marriott Secondary School." "We got into school?" Emily's eyes lit up with excitement. "Yeah, we did," I confirmed, forcing a smile as relief washed over me that one principal had taken pity on my children. "Yay!" they exclaimed in unison, their joy momentarily lifting the heavy weight off my shoulders. The kids and I packed up and moved back to the suburbs that same afternoon. We moved into a hotel called the Pink Palace and got ready to start school the following day.